I didn't need the full moon. The mirror did the lifting. This is a true werewolf story, or close enough that you'll taste iron before the end. People think a werewolf horror story starts with a bite. It doesn't. It starts with something smaller. Guilt, hunger, a promise you can't keep. Tonight, the promise was mine. You're not just watching a werewolf horror story. You're hearing a confession no one was meant to record. What you're about to witness is a true story of transformation. The night the human parts stopped fighting back. The motel smelled like wet carpet and the ghosts of cigarettes. The sign outside blinked Pine Crest Inn, though half the bulbs were dead. So at night it read, "In rest." I read that as mercy. I was a travel nurse who'd stopped traveling, carrying a duffel of regrets and a bottle of off-brand whiskey. When the clerk handed me the key, she said, "Curtains closed on moonlight." Not please, not why, just law. That's how small towns treat the lycanthropy curse, as weather. Room 17 waited, end of the row. One flickering lamp, one humming air conditioner, 3 mirrors that didn't match each other like they'd been stolen from 3 different lives. The first mirror was medicine cabinet cheap. The second, oval, foxed with age. The third, rectangular, leaning against the wall as if it had been caught sneaking out. I looked normal. That was the lie. My reflection exhaled half a beat late. I told myself fluorescent lights do that this was jet lag, burnout, caffeine poisoning, anything but. That's how psychological horror sneaks in, reason pretending it's faith. I washed my face. The tap spat rust. The mirror fogged. For one blink I saw my teeth too sharp, my eyes ringed silver. When I blinked again, I was only me. I wrote a note on motel stationery, "You're safe." Slipped it under the pillow like a saint's relic. Then came the scratching. Soft at first, patient at the bottom of the door, then up the frame, then sideways, like a hand made of keys testing which lock would open first. "Raccoons," I said aloud. Saying anything makes it smaller. The scratching stopped. The bathroom light flickered. The mirror sighed. Something behind the glass drew breath like lungs full of smoke. I told myself this was exhaustion, that every horror story narration starts with a tired voice that mistakes the ordinary for omen. I even smiled. That's when the reflection smiled, back with too many teeth. I shut the bathroom door, crawled under thin blankets and pressed my ear to the silence. Somewhere outside, the full moon horror rolled across the sky, hidden by clouds but not by feeling. The neon outside pulsed against the curtains. In rest, in rest, in rest. The rhythm of a heartbeat you can't trust. I dreamed of the hospital, the man on the bed, the alarm that didn't scream loud enough, the slick heartbeat under my fingers turning into a howl. When I woke, my hands ached like I'd been clenching claws. The claw marks came next, 4 lines across the nightstand, 1 on the sink's edge, a polite little flourish on the rubber key fob, like something had sampled the room for texture. My pulse ran feral. This was no dream, this was anatomy rewriting itself. I stared at my reflection again. My pupils had grown wider, wolf-wide. The oval mirror shimmered, its glass breathing fog from nowhere. The air tasted like pennies and rain. A handprint appeared beside mine, larger, hungrier, curved at the tips. For a second it wasn't a mirror at all. It was a window, and the thing inside wore my face. I turned away, whispering the mantra every survivor learns. It's not real. It's just a story. But real werewolf transformations never ask permission. They begin when you start talking to yourself in plural. Something in my spine popped. Tiny fireworks of pain under the skin. My breath came double, 2 rhythms fighting. For tempo, the reflection followed the second rhythm, not the first. I backed into the corner, clutching the motel Bible like a tourniquet for the soul. The book thudded to the floor. The mirror darkened, reflecting only the moonlight that shouldn't have. Made it through the curtains. That's when I realized the note under my pillow had changed. Your safe was now your save. One letter gone, one meaning stolen. Whatever had scratched the door had learned to edit. Outside, thunder rolled low, a hunter clearing its throat. Inside, my breath steamed like winter. I pressed the record button on my phone. If anyone finds this, my name is Marla Vale. This isn't fiction. This is a true werewolf story. Room 17, Pine Crest Inn. There's something wrong with the mirrors. If I stop talking before sunrise, don't come looking. Just burn the place down. The mic caught the first long exhale that wasn't mine. Oh, growl recorded itself, deep as distance. And somewhere between that sound and silence, I realized I wasn't alone in my own reflection anymore. The moon pushed through the gauze of clouds, silver and pitiless. I pulled the curtains tighter. The light still found me. Morning came late, but the mirrors didn't wait for it. I woke to sunlight that felt counterfeit, brittle as a stage light. When I blinked, the reflection in the oval glass blinked slower, as if she were deciding whether she still wanted to mimic me. This is how transformation horror really begins, not with teeth, but with timing. I told myself I'd leave by noon, pack up, head north, disappear before the next full moon horror tour bus of tourists arrived to photograph fog and pretend the woods weren't watching. But the clerk was gone, the lobby empty except for the ledger, a pen, and one new entry in the guest book under my name. Checkout, never. I laughed. The sound came out low like gravel in a throat. Back in the room, my phone wouldn't unlock. My Face ID failed. The screen flashed, face not recognized. It recognized something, just not me. The air smelled metallic, almost electrical. The A unit rattled as though a heartbeat had crawled inside it. I leaned close and heard the fan stutter on my pulse. The machine was syncing with me. That's the first mercy of the lycanthropy curse. It tells the room you're changing before you can admit it. I checked the scratches on the desk. They deepened overnight, inside the grooves, silver. Not dust, not paint, light, like the wood had been burned by a star the size of a fingernail. I pressed a finger to it. The glow crawled up my veins, spreading warmth like fever that pretends to be grace. For one perfect second, I felt powerful. Then came the hunger. Not for food, not for forgiveness, for motion, for sound, for something breaking. I dug my nails into my arm and watched tiny half-moons bloom in the skin. This isn't the glamorous kind of real werewolf transformation people fantasize about online. No cinematic roar, no heroic music cue. It's quiet. It's anatomy turning traitor cell by cell, as if your body remembers an older blueprint. I turned on the voice memo again. Day 2, Pine Crest Inn. The skin feels crowded. Every sound's too close. If this is a true werewolf story, then the infection is faith. The more I believe it, the faster it grows. Static hissed back, then a reply, my own voice, warped half a tone down. Believe harder. I dropped the phone. It landed screen up. The waveform kept recording. In the audio's reflection, my outline flickered, fur-shadowed. The window view looked wrong. Trees leaned toward me instead of upright. The clouds moved too slow, like film dragged by hand. In the glass, I saw her again. My mirror twin, paler, thinner, her eyes rimmed with the gray of spent lightning. She mouthed something. I matched her lips. You should run, but there was nowhere to run. Survival meant obedience, and obedience meant staying inside the horror narration until it finished writing me. At 11 a.m., the scratching came back, this time from inside the bathroom. The door shivered. The handle turned once, politely. Don't, I whispered. It stopped. Then another sound, not scratching, breathing, slow, synchronized with mine, then half a breath ahead. It was leading the rhythm. The mirror was fogging, though the room was cold. In the vapor, words formed backward. Remember the bite, but I hadn't been bitten. Not that I remembered, unless guilt counts as teeth. I pressed my palm to the fog and asked, "What are you?" The answer was movement. My reflection opened her mouth. I didn't. She bared teeth that glinted faint silver. The oval glass bulged outward like it was inhaling me. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. The air turned metallic again, the penny taste of memory. Every psychological horror symptom textbook printed itself through my nerves. Derealization, auditory hallucination, somatic dissociation. But none of the textbooks ever warned what happens when the hallucination blinks independently. Attention, reset, a knock at the door. I froze. The peephole showed nothing. The knocking came again. 3 beats, the rhythm of a human heart. When I opened the door, no one stood there. Only the key fob dangling from the knob. Freshly polished, number 17 carved deeper as if by claws. I shut it. The room seemed smaller. My shoulders brushed the walls when I turned. I realized I was hunching, protecting something that hadn't fully arrived yet. On the desk, my phone lit by itself. The voice memo played back. Every werewolf horror story has a midpoint, the second night, where denial dies first. I didn't record that line. The bed shook once, then stilled. The TV flicked on without permission, screen black except for white text. Full moon tonight, 9:11 p.m. No channel, no signal, just warning. I pressed my hand to the screen. Static crawled up my arm. The muscles spasmed in reply. Under my nails, skin began to pale into silver. A new reflection blinked in the dark glass of the TV. Eyes yellowed, teeth lengthening in microseconds, the kind of face evolution hides in footnotes. The first howl didn't come from my throat. It came from inside the electronics. Feedback, distortion, the room itself remembering an older frequency. I curled against the wall, whispering a prayer that wasn't in any Bible. Let it stop. Let the story stop. But this is survival horror, and survival demands surrender. The lights blew out. The mirrors glowed faint as moons. Something beneath my skin smiled. By evening, the room had learned my name. It said it with the vents rattle, with the TV's cough, with the neon heartbeat punching through the curtains. In rest, in rest. A lie in 2 words. At 8:44 p.m., the clerk slid something under my door. I didn't see her shadow, didn't hear footsteps, just a scrape and silence. A pamphlet, one color, cheap paper, the kind churches hand out when they don't have answers but do have rules. The moon belongs to God. Beneath it, in jittery type, if the mirrors breathe, face the floor. If the floor hums, kneel. If you already prayed, run. I laughed because prayer had never done much for me except make my pulse sound formal. But there was a number scrawled on the bottom in ballpoint. 9/11. A time, not a plea. The TV blinked alive. Same number, white on black. The bathroom light, dead all day, flickered once like a bad omen rehearsing. I opened the voice memo. No more. Disclaimers, no more excuses. This wasn't just a horror story narration. This was a ledger. Marla Vale. Room 17. If you're listening, count with me. It's a true werewolf story if the bones sign the confession. It's transformation horror if they squeal while they sign. I set the phone down. My hands shook. Not fear exactly. Anticipation, like the body recognizes its own migration. The walls leaned in, or I leaned out of myself. It's hard to tell, on the cliff edge of a real werewolf transformation. The oval mirror drew breath. Fog bloomed from nowhere. The other mirrors agreed, each fog a different tempo. The medicine cabinet panted like a runner. The leaning rectangle took long, patient inhales, as if savoring the room. In each, I stood a fraction misaligned, 3 versions of me arguing with the light. Fetty 8. I locked the bathroom door out of habit and immediately hated the decision. The sound of the bolt was too final, a period where a comma should go. Behind me, the glass flexed, bulged, eased, as if the mirror had a throat and was swallowing the last of the day. I watched my shoulders broaden, not swelling exactly, but changing posture like a soldier who forgot how to slouch. My teeth didn't lengthen so much as decide to be used. Hair rose along my arms the way grass rises when wind chooses a field. The AC cut out. The room held its breath. 9:05, I could have run out the door, past the lobby, into the parking lot where everyone pretends the night is a ceiling, not a mouth. But survival horror sometimes means holding still while the hurricane names you, and there was the pamphlet's line. If you already prayed, run. I hadn't, so I stayed. The first pop was tiny. A knuckle, maybe, a trapped bubble of air. The sneeze of a joint. Then another, not painful, clarifying, like unsnarling a necklace. The pain came after, not as a slash, but a memory of falling. What hurt wasn't the body. It was the plan. Everything I had intended for my life slid 6 inches to the left and looked at me like I'd wasted our time. The mirror didn't show blood. YouTube won't permit that, and truth rarely needs it. What it showed was the long, solemn choreography of the lycanthropy curse, the body choosing a different grammar. My hands widened, not monster-wide, not movie-wide, just enough to make my phone suddenly look like a toy. The tendons along my neck tuned themselves to a lower note. The eyes in the glass lifted their color one hue toward gold, as if the world had altered its white balance. 9. The sink hummed in sympathy. The floor answered. The cheap light fixture whispered in its chain. The room had become an orchestra with a conductor older than language. This is the part you always skip to in a werewolf horror story, I told the memo. But the real werewolf. Transformation isn't the scream. It's the breath right before you decide to keep breathing. The mirror exhaled on me. It smelled like pine sap and old coins. Across the fog, a message wrote itself backward. Open your mouth. I did, not because it commanded me, because it matched what my jaw was already doing. A long, low vowel escaped, the kind animals use to remember each other in the dark. 10. The door to the bathroom, the one I'd locked, groaned like a throat trying not to cry. Something outside tested it. No scratch this time, no tentative keys made of claws, a pressure, a presence, a patient palm. I didn't want whoever stood there to be human. I didn't want a witness. Witnesses make monsters behave. Don't, I said, first to the door, then to myself, because we both knew what 9/11 meant. The pamphlet's edge cut my palm, paper sting, precise as blame. I held the sting like sacrament. The TV in the other. Room clicked over, the volume low but clear enough for the words to infiltrate the tile. Full moon, now. The mirrors stopped fogging. The glass went perfectly clear, the way a lake goes clear right before it swallows. In it stood a woman who used to be me and a creature who would be. If you overlay the images long enough, they agree. The jawline, broader, the ear a touch higher, the canines less polite, the eyes lit from a coal too old to be called fire. In my chest, 2 tempos argued. Heart 1, human, panicked, tap, tap, tap. Heart 2, patient, tidal, a metronome set to moonlight. 11, the electricity thinned, sound stretched. A neon heartbeat outside went from in rest to in RST as one bulb died with a vertical sigh. I put my hands on the counter and felt the laminates soften under the heat of them. Not scorch, not melt, but yield. My nails pebbled, then steadied, not quite claws, only the memory of tools I used to own. From somewhere far away, the voice memo caught a whisper I don't remember saying. If you're still here with me, count your breaths with mine. If I skip one, subscribe and don't look back. The air tasted like the first seconds of rain, the kind that makes the whole street lift its face. I lifted mine, and then, no shattering, no cinematic fireworks of bone. The room's pitch dropped a note, and I dropped with it, the spine bowing. Not from pain, but recognition. The creature isn't a costume, it's a dialect. You don't put it on. You finally speak it. My shoulders tilted forward. Balanced, my weight found the balls of my feet. The world came sharper at the edges, not brighter, just more specific. I could hear the night making maps outside, moths batting the cheap neon, asphalt cooling, a dog 5 blocks away deciding whether to bark. Smell became a country with borders I hadn't known to cross. The clerk's cardigan, cedar and worry. The manager's office, coffee grounds and a gun that had not been fired in years. Room 19, 2 hearts, one asleep, one pretending. I grinned, and saw the grin come late in the glass, hungry and unembarrassed. A noise rose from the vent, low, harmonic, threading into my throat until we shared it. Not a howl, not yet. A vowel held steady, a promise you make to a sound and keep. The knock returned, soft, then softer, then a voice through the wood, careful as a parent easing a fevered child awake. Marla, kneel. Don't look at it when it finishes. Kneel and breathe. The voice knew me. The voice hurt to hear. I didn't kneel. Instead, I looked straight at the creature in the mirror as it stepped closer without moving. We matched our hands to the glass. Her fingers were longer, the pads darker, the nails a private moon. Say it, I told her. Me, us. Say what I am. The mouth moved. The room dimmed. The AC rattled itself into a prayer, and the word came, simple, old, unafraid to be true. Wolf. The fluorescent bulb popped, giving us the dark we needed. In the sudden quiet, something, like a laugh, shook free of my chest. Not human, not safe, but honest. The door's lock turned on its own, and whoever waited outside let themselves in. I didn't turn to greet them. I was still learning how to stand. The door eased open on its own weight. No footsteps, just air moving like something polite entering a church. A woman stood in the doorway, older, grey hair plaited tight, wearing the same moon-stitched cardigan as the clerk. Her face was both familiar and wrong, like a photograph taken a second before someone dies. She looked at me, not startled by the shape I was becoming, not even cautious, just tired. You opened the mirrors, she said. You were supposed to last longer. Her voice carried the calm of somebody who's watched real werewolf transformations, often enough to know which ones end in mercy. I wanted to ask what she meant, but speech came out tangled, half growl, half word. Why me? She stepped inside, closed the door, and drew a small circle in the dust with her finger. Inside the circle, she placed 3 objects, a nail, a tooth, and a folded note. You picked the room, she said. Room 17 is the one that remembers. She called herself Etta Vale, mother's name, dead 20 years. That's the first cruelty of the lycanthropy curse. It borrows the faces you'd kneel for. You shouldn't be here, I told her. Neither should you, she said. The moon doesn't choose. It corrects. The word corrects hit like a hammer in the ribs. She explained, slow, patient, that every generation of Vale women carried the mark. The town called it the Pine Crest Line, an old pact traded blood for silence after the first outbreak when the mountains howled louder than storms. They built the motel over the burial ground, each mirror forged from the melted silver used to restrain the first beast, a family business of containment. We needed someone who wouldn't believe, she said. Unbelief slows the change, but you were already broken. The guilt opened you faster. I wanted to deny it, but my reflection answered before I could. The woman in the glass smiled, then looked past me, to Edda. She's lying, the reflection said. The voice came from the mirror itself, not my mouth. Edda didn't flinch. She lifted the nail from the circle and pressed it into her palm until blood welled bright and thin. Pain's the only truth left in a werewolf horror story, she whispered. It separates the beast from the dream. Lightning split the window white and clean. The sound that followed wasn't thunder. It was history coughing itself awake. The motel shuddered. All the doors along the hall clicked open like synchronized gasps. From every mirror in every room, fog spilled outward, rolling low along the carpet. Edda looked at me, eyes gone silver. They're waking, the reflections that never learned to die. Her cardigan smoked where moonlight touched it. She pulled, a key on a chain from around her neck, silver heavy, engraved with a wolf's jaw. This opens the basement, the original cell. If you stay up here, you'll finish the change and join them. If you go down, you might remember who you were. I didn't trust her. But staying meant becoming the next legend whispered in true werewolf stories told over diner coffee. So I took the key. It burned cold into my palm, branding a crescent that pulsed like a second heartbeat. Edda nodded once. When you hear the pack call your name, don't answer. Then she stepped backward into the mirror, her shape dissolving like smoke drawn through glass. The surface rippled, sealed, and only my reflection remained, half human, half promise. Attention reset. The hallway stretched longer than the building should allow. Each door breathed open and shut, exhaling the smell of dust, old soap, and something copper sweet. In some rooms, silhouettes stood frozen in mirrors mid-snarl. In others, just beds neatly made, as if waiting for guests who never stopped leaving. Down the stairwell, the air thickened. The sound changed, less echo, more pulse. At the base, the sign, authorized personnel only, moon storage, a joke maybe. Or a warning carved in sarcasm. The basement door accepted the key. Behind it, a corridor of stone and condensation. Runes etched along the walls pulsed faintly, silver veins in rock. Every few steps, a mirror fragment was cemented into the masonry, each shard catching light that wasn't there. In one, I saw myself full wolf, muzzle stained in shadow. In another, I saw nothing at all. Just the empty hallway, as though I'd already passed beyond reflection. The key's mark throbbed in rhythm with the runes. The air carried that metallic perfume again, sharper now, mixed with pine and rain and something heart-breakingly familiar, home. That's the paradox of transformation horror. The body screams, danger, while the soul whispers, welcome back, at day. The corridor's end, a steel door waited chained crosswise. On the door carved deep, blood owes blood. Behind it low growls rose, dozens, maybe hundreds, a choir of unfinished throats. I understood then what Edda meant. The mirrors weren't cages. They were windows to every veil that had failed containment. Each generation added another reflection, and I was next in line. This is the real werewolf. Transformation, I said into the recorder, voice shaking but proud. Not claws, not fur. The inheritance, the understanding that the werewolf legend was never legend. It was bookkeeping. I pressed the key into the chain lock. The runes brightened. The howls synced to my pulse. Before I turned it, I whispered a prayer I didn't remember learning. Let me finish the sentence my ancestors started. The lock released. The door exhaled cold silver air, and from the dark beyond came the sound of every heartbeat I'd ever loved, pounding in unison, calling my name the way only the cursed remember it. The door groaned shut behind me, steel rasping on stone. I should have been afraid of what waited in the dark, but fear felt too small now, like a coat that no longer fit the body inside it. The key mark on my palm glowed faint silver, tracing every pulse beat. I whispered into the recorder, if this ends up online, call it a true werewolf story. Don't clean it up for the algorithm. Leave the breathing, the stumbles, the prayers. People need to hear what a real werewolf transformation sounds like when it's trying to stay human. The air answered with a low, mechanical hum. Ventilation, or heartbeat, hard to tell. The cell was circular, the floor engraved with runes that pulsed faintly. Mirrors were set into the walls at intervals, each fogged from the inside. I stepped into the circle. The silver light beneath my feet brightened, scanning me like an X-ray. Every bone answered in its own pitch. From the far side of the room, a voice hissed, Edda's thin as radio static. If you break the circle, it keeps what you leave behind. How do I stop it? You don't. You negotiate. That's the part no one mentions in a werewolf legend. The curse is conversational. It talks until you agree to listen. I knelt, palms on the rune lines, and spoke to the dark. I didn't choose this. I don't want to hurt anyone, the dark replied, in my own voice, older. Then stop pretending you never wanted power. The runes brightened, silver turning to white. Pain followed, disciplined, almost mathematical, like bones learning choreography. My spine arched, joints aligning in a new geometry. I gritted my teeth, breathing through the rhythm. Control, I thought, control. Each inhale brought fur ghosting across my arms. Each exhale burned it away. The body was a coin flipping mid-air, never landing. Containment, I said, not surrender. The mirrors pulsed, each reflecting a different moment of the transformation horror. In one, I was human, sweating. In another, jaw unhinged, eyes glowing. In the third, something holy and ruined crouched halfway to animal. This is what psychological horror never tells you. Control is the most painful kind of faith. A whisper threaded through the vents, multiple voices layered, every ancestor. Whoever knelt here, we built this place to remember the boundary. If you cross it, the moon stops being sky and becomes appetite. The circle tightened, my nails lengthened, curved. Blood beaded where palm met rune, sizzling on contact. Human blood too warm for sacred metal. I clenched my fists and forced the claws back. The effort cost me something invisible, a memory maybe. I tried to picture my face from a week ago and couldn't. That's the trade, said the many voices. Control costs context. They laughed, hundreds of throats sharing, one humorless sound, attention reset, a faint chime. The phone, still recording, read battery 2%. I crawled toward it, each movement half animal, half prayer. This is what containment looks like, I whispered into the mic. Every werewolf horror story sells the howl, but no one tells you about the bargain. The lycanthropy curse doesn't want blood, it wants narrative control. I slammed the phone into the center of the rune circle. The screen cracked, light bleeding through spidered glass, one last lens to hold me human. The mirrors reacted. Each reflection stepped forward, overlapping until they formed a single figure, a wolf draped in my scrubs, eyes lit like confession candles. She spoke through all mouths at once. You tried to cure hunger with guilt, wrong prescription. I can hold it, I said. You can host it. That's different. The reflection raised a claw and drew a vertical line down the glass. The mark glowed, then split into two paths, one silver, one black. Choose, she said. Silver, memory, black, freedom. I hesitated. The air smelled of cedar and ozone. The silver path pulsed like a heartbeat begging for duty. The black shimmered like midnight water, no reflection, no rule. I reached for silver. My fingers passed through light, and agony followed. A flood of sensation, every sound amplified, every smell sharpened, every heartbeat in the world suddenly mapped into me. I saw Edda's face, the motel, the forest beyond, all drawn in threads of light. Then the mirrors cracked, and the reflections scattered like frightened birds. When I looked down, my hands were my own again, smaller, human, trembling. The fur retreated like tide, the jaw realigned, the room exhaled. For a moment, I thought I'd won. Then the floor split. From the cracks rose shapes, shadows with bone in them, former veils who'd chosen black over silver. Their eyes were empty mirrors. You didn't win, they chorused. You just paid a higher rent. They closed around me, not hostile, reverent. Each pressed a palm to my chest. Every contact left a brand, a circle with a crescent inside. One voice, Edda's again, whispered, "Control is temporary. The moon always collects." The runes went dark, the air cooled. The shadows melted back into the cracks. leaving me alone, burned but breathing. I staggered up the stairs toward the lobby. The hallway was longer now, mirrors on both sides, each one showing me a minute in the future. In every reflection, my eyes flickered gold, then dimmed. The wolf still there, but leashed, for now. "This isn't over," I told the recorder. "It never is. That's why every werewolf legend feels unfinished. The story keeps chewing on its own tail." Outside, dawn cut the mountains into paper silhouettes. The neon sign blinked one final time, in rest, then burned out. I stepped into the cold, the smell of pine and blood and freedom mixing into one impossible scent. The voice in my head, low, steady, ancient, answered with a growl that sounded almost like gratitude. "We'll behave," it said, "until the next full moon," and for once I believed it. Daylight isn't mercy, it's interrogation. The sun clawed through the motel blinds, cutting my face into confession stripes. The room smelled of bleach and burned silver. I'd made it through the night, technically human, but the skin on my hands hummed like power lines, alive, impatient. The mirrors had gone still again, their surfaces dull as dead water. The one by the bed was cracked from corner to corner, a scar down its heart. I told myself it looked like me. "It's over," I whispered, as if saying it would make the werewolf horror story end like a movie instead of a sentence. A hum rose from the glass, low and steady. The reflection brightened, not mine this time. The wolf self was waiting, eyes ember gold, expression almost gentle. "Morning trial," it said. "Verdict time. The accusation." I expected fury. Instead came a list. "You wanted control. You killed that man in the hospital when..." You froze. "You came here to hide, not to heal." Each sentence hit like a pulse through the lycanthropy curse, every truth stamped on my bloodstream. "You're the curse," the reflection said. "Not me. I'm just the evidence." I reached for the mirror. The glass turned warm under my fingers, beating faintly. "If I'm the curse," I said, "then why do I still care who I hurt?" The reflection smiled. "Because guilt's the leash. The pack loves its leashes. That's psychological horror at its purest, when the monster speaks fluent therapy." The defense, I hit record on the phone again. "Daylight 1, I said. "Post-containment phase. The mirrors speak. The real werewolf transformation isn't finished. It's moral now. It's deciding whether empathy survives the molt." The wolf's image leaned closer until muzzle met my cheek on the glass. "You think this is redemption? It's rehearsal. Rehearsal for what? For next time. Every true werewolf story ends with, 'until the next moon.' You're not special." I laughed, dry, cracked. "No, but I'm still the narrator." That word changed everything. The glass rippled, annoyed. The wolf's eyes narrowed. "You're not telling it right." The reversal. The reflection moved without me, stepping out of sync again, half-second lag that widened into a canyon. Then she stepped through. No cinematic explosion, just the air thickening, a smell of ozone and fur, and suddenly she was standing across from me, solid, breathing, my own face, silver-eyed and scarred at the jawline, wearing the half-smile of someone who's stopped apologizing. "Control is over," she said. "We share now." I stumbled backward, hit the dresser. My hand found the pamphlet Edda had given me. "The moon belongs to God." I held it up like scripture. The wolf-me tilted her head, curious. "That God's retired." She advanced. Each step clicked bone against tile. The air temperature dropped. Frost laced the edges of the mirrors still hanging. "If I kill you," I said, "do I go free?" "If you kill me," she said, "you vanish. The werewolf legend needs both halves to stay coherent. You delete the story, you delete yourself." That's when I understood what Edda meant about negotiation. The bargain eye took a breath, the kind that feels stolen from the wrong lungs. "Then merge," I said. "But I speak first." The wolf grinned. "Deal." She placed her hand over mine on the mirror's edge. Pain flared, bright and clean. The room dissolved into silver fog. Inside, that blur, scenes replayed. The hospital monitor flatlining, the bus window reflection watching me sleep. The motel key fob bleeding numbers. When the fog cleared, only one reflection remained. Mine, steady, eyes human but rimmed in light. The wolf's voice lived behind my pulse now, not beside it. A partnership, not a possession. The aftermath. Motel's phone rang, a real sound, abrupt, ancient. I answered, static, then a woman's voice. This is management. Checkouts at noon. You made it. What happens if I stay? Then you start collecting mirrors. Click. The line died. The neon sign outside flickered once, spelling a new word I couldn't unsee. Inherit I packed. Not much to carry. Scrubs. Phone, pamphlet, silver key. The air outside tasted cleaner, but the pine trees whispered in stereo. I turned the voice recorder back on. End of trial, I said. I passed, I think. I'm free for now. This survival horror isn't about living through the night. It's about living with what you bring out of it. I glanced once more at the cracked mirror. The faint outline of ears, fur, gold eyes looked back and nodded. Next full moon, the voice inside promised, we'll hunt together. I left Pine Crest Inn before noon, but the road didn't let me leave. Every curve was the same curve, every pine the same sentinel. The wolf inside purred with recognition. Home, it said, the highway split around a ridge. Beyond it, a field glittered, with abandoned mirrors, hundreds, maybe thousands, propped against fence posts, tree trunks, even one another like cards in a game the wind had lost interest in. Each reflected a different hour of the night I'd just survived. I parked the car and stepped into the field. The mirrors hummed when I passed, a chorus of low metal voices. In one pane I saw the nurse who'd fled the hospital. In another, the half-creature whispering into a recorder. In another still, kneeling in silver light, all my unfinished versions waiting for verdict. The phone buzzed in my pocket, new voicemail. I pressed play. Marla, the voice said, mine, older. You can't drive away from a werewolf horror story. You can only change its narrator. The call ended. The mirrors brightened as the sun bled out behind the ridge. Clouds stacked, bruised purple. The day wanted to die early. The return by the time I reached the next town sign, the moon was already rising. Too early, too full. The radio crackled static that shaped itself into howls. I pulled over at a gas station whose lights were dead and whose air smelled of old oil and something musky, alive. Inside, I found a payphone bolted to the wall. Its receiver pulsed with faint heat. On the counter lay a folded note in my own handwriting. When the night chooses, don't run. The wolf stirred, eager. The last vestiges of control, the silver mark on my palm, began to fade, lines dissolving like salt. The body knows when a contract expires. I walked back outside. The field across the road shimmered with moonlight, every blade of grass tipped in frost. The mirrors back at the inn were only the surface. This was the foundation, the pact spread underground, silver roots feeding on guilt. It's happening again, I said into the recorder. Another full moon horror. Another test of the lycanthropy. Curse. If anyone hears this, understand. Every true werewolf story is circular. The moon writes in loops. The decision. The transformation began slower this time, as if giving me the courtesy of choice. Muscles stretched, breath deepened, sight sharpened until every shadow had veins. I could stop fighting, or I could aim it. Edda's last words echoed, "When you hear the pack call your name, don't answer." The first howl rose from the hills, a chorus layered in pain and pride. It called Marla. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the phone camera on myself. This isn't a confession anymore, I told the lens. It's a manual. If you ever feel the pull, remember, control isn't the cure, it's the choreography. My reflection in the phone shimmered between human and wolf, both nodding. We tell the story together now. The howl returned, nearer. The air vibrated. I dropped the phone on the hood of the car and stepped into the light. The change was clean. This time, bones shifting like gears greased by acceptance. Fur rose, muscles braided, the body choosing its truest syntax. No blood, no screams, just the language of instinct finishing its sentence. When the moon reached zenith, the field of mirrors lit up. Each pane captured a fraction of me, a mosaic of motion. In every reflection, the wolf looked less like a monster and more like an answer. The outcome at dawn. Travelers found the gas station door hanging open, the payphone off the hook, the car empty. Only the recorder remained blinking red, the last entry. They'll say I vanished, but really, I became folklore. Another footnote in the werewolf legend. The mirror doesn't lie. It archives. If you hear a howl that sounds like your own heartbeat, don't run. That's just me, making sure the story keeps breathing. The recording ended with a faint growl that shifted into a sigh, a perfect crossfade between species. If the mirrors ever fog on their own, leave the light on and keep listening. The night chooses someone new every moon. If you felt it breathing behind the narration, subscribe. Maybe it'll skip you next time. Every howl you've ever heard was someone trying to come home. If you heard this one, you're part of the pack now. Stay with us. The next moon's already rising. This is Whispering Narratives, where horror remembers your name.